Welcome to TAP, and today I am excited that I'm joined by Diana Mary Rose, who has several titles, so let's go through some of them. She's a Reiki master, a homeopathic healer, psychic medium, and she is the author of this new book that we'll be speaking about today by the name Atlantis and Gaia Magic, Reincarnation, COVID, and Earth Healing. So we'll dive into what all of that could suggest for us. And just, Dan, I'll say welcome you in just a bit. I just wanted to have this piece from your website into the introduction as well, because on your website it says, I was not born a healer and certainly not a clairaudient, let alone a writer on psychic matters. But I have been propelled in that direction through life crisis. And then you say that today actually your purpose is to write about karma and reincarnation. So that's amazing. Welcome. I'll say welcome now. Welcome.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Manna, for inviting me on the show. Yes.
So what do we say about all of these introductions? And this, I was not born a healer.
It's an interesting one, actually, because I was patently born a very sensitive soul, as I now understand. But of course, when you're a child, you just think you're normal. So no, there were quite a few abnormal things going on in my childhood. But I just thought, well, that's just me being silly, or pull yourself together, this kind of business. So no, I think I was definitely, I have always been a very sensitive soul, and I've also seen things and kind of not heard things particularly at that stage, but imagined voices. You kind of like have imaginary friends when you're little, don't you? And I certainly had plenty of those, out in the garden with the fairies. So, and I was chattering to them all day long. Now, the clairaudience came through with Reiki. Once I did a Reiki attunement, and then I went through, right through to master, Reiki master, and then I went on to another thing called Seikem attunements, which are Egyptian energies, comparable but different, shall we say, to Reiki. Then I started to see and hear things big time, and combine that with meditating. I meditate every day, and I started meditating at about the age of 50, roughly when I was getting into Seikem energy. Then the clairaudience built up and built up and built up. It's a process. It's like strengthening a muscle, by doing a lot of meditational process and healing on yourself. You sort of clear the airways in a sense. And the more you clear them, the more the psychic side comes through. And until finally, a couple of years ago, I realized I was having quite significant conversations with the other side. And I was hearing a very clear and solid voice coming through, and it wasn't mine. It wasn't delusional. I was hearing somebody talking to me. And so when COVID happened, like a lot of people, you were sitting at home wondering what to do. I thought, do you know what? I'm going to write a book. And that's when I started to write Atlantis and Gaia. And a very kind publisher published it, John Hunt, and here we are today. So
that's great.
It's a process. I'm 65 now, and it's really I think there's several elements to being psychic. One is you're born very sensitive. Some people are born exceptionally psychic, but sensitivity is a stage on that road. And then the more you meditate and the more you do healing practice on yourself, use homeopathic remedies, herbalism to, purify the body, the more psychic you become. And that's what's happened to me. So I'm now, I would call myself exceptionally psychic.
Oh, that's great. I mean, and that's really what matters, right? You have different titles, but then what matters is that you actually do this practice yourself, and like you say, clear out, and then you're able to open more into the spiritual realm.
Yeah, that's right. It's all about the all the auric field, the energy body around us, being clouded with all sorts of sort of gunk, really, and the meridians the Chinese people talk about, and so on, clearing all the airways and purifying the body. And then gradually, when I was meditating, I started meditating, oh God, 12 years ago now, I should think. And I started to see people in historic clothing. And I was hearing words, just little words, or maybe a half a sentence, this sort of thing. And I was talking to a friend of mine who is incredibly psychic as well. And I said, what do you think? What is this? I'm seeing this character in historic clothes, And she said to me, well, that's one of your past lives. Oh. So, part of it is intellectual, is making connections, and I hadn't actually thought of that. I thought, this is a bit weird. Why am I saying this, soldier or woman or whatever it is in 18th century clothing, And she made that connection for me. No, it's one of your past lives. Oh, okay.
And did you immediately trust her interpretation? Because that is some interpretation.
It made good sense. Yeah. It made perfect sense. I mean, and this is the part of it, I think, with reincarnation, is part of it is maybe somebody telling you something, but then the other part is, well, does that feel right for me?
Right.
And it felt absolutely right. So,
I get that. I get that. Yeah. Because reincarnation, we're talking about prior lives, and we're talking about then there's some recognition of that somewhere in our psyche, if it's related to something we've been in earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go a little bit into to your book, because you start out, I think it's maybe related to what you're talking about now. You have these disclaimers at first, which I really enjoy. I think there's also a part of these disclaimers that's around, I don't know, it seems to be colored by 2020, and where we had to also say, I'm not a medical doctor, and because
absolutely.
We would, right,
100%.
Because people would be banned from social media if they said, you should take vitamin C, right?
Yeah. Crazy. I know, crazy.
Yeah, so there's absolutely some of those. Right. But then you continue to say that the stories in this book are true in spiritual terms, although they may not appear correct from a human perspective, and that we should not believe every last, and that you don't believe every last detail of your own script, because you're human, and that nothing is real in the sense of being of Earth alone. These are coded messages, I feel. Can you...
These are coded messages. Don't litigate. It's in the book. You can't.
Yeah.
Because the publisher, all publishers say, look, you have to put in a disclaimer. So I did. I did put one in. And also, it's absolutely right that it's my interpretation of... but it's not my interpretation. Actually, it's what I hear, because I'm a clairaudient. I hear words. I hear sentences. I hear whole chapters, and I write them down. But on the other hand, if I use my intellectual self, not my psychic self, where did that come from? I don't know. So so you have to. That's right. You have to cover yourself, and all I can say is there's nothing in my book which is me. It all comes through my spirit guide. So all the wording, although it sounds like it's me chatting away, and it is me chatting away, it's me actually taking dictation from my spirit guide. Everything in there is through an internal voice, in a sense, in my head. And that's how I write. It's an interesting way.
So one part of it is, don't believe every detail of your own script. That, I guess, does that relate to the narrative we have about ourselves and our common perceptions? Does it relate to that? Or how do you mean this? Don't believe your own script.
It's interesting, because actually, the more I've been writing, and now, of course, I've been writing down words from spirit for a decade or more. The more I realize that everything that comes through from spirit is coded. it's coded messages, and you'll find this if you go right back to the Romans. Everything comes through in puns, it comes through in metaphor, it comes through in symbols. So even though I'm hearing somebody saying something, it's still to a certain extent coming through in a symbolic format, which means that I can misunderstand things, and I do sometimes. If I write it down direct, it'll come through in a complete jumble. It'll kind of make sense. But then later on, as I look back into research into past lives, I realize that I've got the wrong name in the wrong place, because what will happen is up there in spirit, they will slip in symbols of a previous past life which relates to the present past life. So you can actually get the wrong name or even the wrong date coming through for the past life that you're researching. So it's fascinating, but it's complicated. So yes, sometimes things have to be altered when I realize that I'm actually dealing with a deeper layer of whatever it was I was looking at, which is not in that past life. It's in the one before, which relates to it. So it's you have to read the book. You have to read.
Yeah.
What I do is I use George Harrison, because he came through very early on when I was writing the book as an example of past lives upon past lives upon past lives. So I take George right back through time, looking at some of his very, very interesting, fascinating indeed past lives and how they relate to each other. So that is my teaching method, as it were, of how reincarnation works. I use George, and dear George, I didn't mean to, but when as I was writing my introduction to the book, the Beatles came in, and I thought, well, I don't want the Beatles in here. They're old hat. So as you do, I mean, I have free will when I'm writing. So I just, delete that paragraph. I don't want the Beatles in. Delete paragraph, move on. Beatles come back in. Delete paragraph, move on. And eventually, after rather a long time, I thought, oh, well, okay, let's go with it, see where it goes. Let's see where the Beatles go, take me. And out came this really fascinating understanding of their spiritual impact, shall we say, on the 1960s and beyond. And then later on, when I was talking about reincarnation, George Harrison came into the conversation. I said, oh, okay, let's have a look at George then. Because when you're writing, you're taking dictation from spirit in a sense, but you do have free will. You have free will to negotiate to a certain level which direction you want to take the writing in. And I have my ideas, and obviously my spirit guide has other ideas. And he was fully determined to bring the Beatles in big time. And what happened was ultimately is a significant number of pages taken up with George and his extraordinary past lives, including Vivaldi, a most unlikely past life in a way. Although, again, when you start to think about it, they're both musicians. Why shouldn't he be Vivaldi? They're both strings, in a certain area. And so that one came through. And also another one, which is extraordinary, which is Rasputin. I think, oh, my goodness. And this is where you couldn't make it up. You couldn't make it up because it's so bizarre. Rasputin. And anyway, but in actual fact, if you look at photographs of George Harrison in the 1970s, they're not far off what Rasputin looked like. So then I was looking at photographs and how people compare, and it is quite extraordinary.
That's interesting. I would really want to have all those names and those lines that fit together. You also mentioned William Shakespeare. You're also doing a similar thing with his soul, where
Shakespeare.
Yeah, and what I would like to do is then look at their astrology, because this is the astrology that I do is related to past lives.
Is so interesting.
It is. It's like a whole study of death charts, and because the death chart would obviously be something not only ending, but also a new life beginning. And,
Yes.
so all of those.
Oh, gosh, how fascinating is that? To take it one stage further into astrology. That's really, really interesting.
That's also symbols, like you said. That's symbols. So
Yeah.
it's the soul's language.
Yeah. What came through with William Shakespeare was that he was clairaudient, like me, and obviously not like me. He's a genius, at producing plays, but clairaudient nevertheless. He heard every word of his plays and put them down. Now, I can understand that, because if you read through his plays like you do at school, they are airy fairy. The language is ethereal. And that's the kind of language that I hear too. I hear it like that. It comes through on almost another. It's English that we know, and yet it's strange English. It flows. It has puns. It has riddles. Everything that Shakespeare has within his plays. So I think yes, and also when you think about it, these are all my thoughts after I heard, that he was a clairaudient. So then I start to think, well, yes. How could he write so many plays in such a short period of time? I mean, this has always been the subject matter for professors of English literature, isn't it? How can anyone be so brilliant? And so the idea of him being very psychic and actually hearing what he needed to put down makes perfectly good sense.
Yeah, like someone else had had something to do with it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so, yes, I mean, but to come back to your astrology thing, which is interesting, because what came through in Atlantis and Gaia is that he is a later incarnation for Virgil, who wrote, of course, the Aeneid and the Georgics and so on. So the Roman poet Virgil.
Okay.
So he's a poet upon a poet, in a sense.
Right.
And that's something that I have found out when you look at past lives, that there's always a relevance to what they were doing in a past life and what they're doing today. There's a link.
And so is it that way for everyone? Because I'm sure I'm not the only one thinking this right now, as the listeners are hearing this, because you kind of want to know, how does this relate to me? Is it like that for everyone? For
everybody, okay. Yes, for everybody. There's always a reason.
Yeah.
Why you are the person you are now, and that reason will have a very distinct connection to a past life, or multiple past lives, indeed. And also, your fears and your phobias are very strong connections to recent past lives, or indeed earlier past lives, which were unbelievably traumatic. So, if somebody's got a fear of drowning, or a fear of whatever it is, if you delve into their past lives, you'll find some very relevant trauma that happened. And often, although not always, that trauma will have happened almost at the moment of death. So maybe they died drowning or whatever. And they bring that, because it's at the moment of death, that fear comes straight through into the next incarnation. So you're born with a massive fear. And you can see how that would work, Yeah, so I see these links all the time. And that's the... Yeah.
Yeah, I'm again thinking in symbols that would be very related to Pluto, the symbol of Pluto in the chart. Yeah, and I really feel you. And I also, when you say this, I also come to think of how important it is with this knowledge as we do therapy, because I also offer therapy, and I don't speak about this, but just to have it in the back of your mind, that this is not necessarily something that happened in this life. The things that you're struggling with now, it can go way back. And I think there's a certain way of dealing with it and holding space for it that is different than if you don't have this understanding.
No, because you're permanently looking for something in this lifetime which may have triggered it, and it simply isn't there. Um, and that it's a problem in the West because, of course, the Christian Church refuses to acknowledge reincarnation. In the West, we're all indoctrinated with that, you know. So no, most people wouldn't even consider that as a possibility, you know, because it's not something that we're brought up with. I remember when I was a child, and I had this theory, which is a really good theory, which is that, you know, you're born and you grow and you grow and grow, and then you sort of lessen and lessen and lessen, and you go back into the earth, and then you grow and grow and grow again, right? Which that's basically called reincarnation. Although I'd never heard of reincarnation when I was that age. And then when I was about 7, my mother said, oh no, you just die. That's it. And I was horrified. I was really petrified because I had this really lovely little idea that we reincarnate, you know. And now, after all these years, now I think, no, I was right and she was wrong.
Yeah.
But at that moment in time, she stamped on that completely by her, you know, because mums and dads, you know, adults, they know everything, don't they? And little kids don't know much else, supposedly. And she just stamped on it. And that finished me off for, you know, decades, really. It was that's actually what happens to most people, I would think, you know.
Yeah, it's actually something that I wanted to ask you, that when we are talking about what we bring in from past lives and the fears, if your fear had something to do with that, some kind of, you know, the fear of, I'm going to use a word from psychology, self-activation. Do you think, did it relate to that? Because you started meditating, you know, when you were older, and so what about before? Did you have any fear to really go there and be who you really are? Or how was it for you?
With fear, no, I had one. When I was basically born with this fear, and it's a fear of blindness, and also that relates to blind people as well, and sticks, white walking sticks, and, you know, all this kind of stuff, right? And I thought, well, I'm just being silly. Now, I did have a psychotherapist when I was 20 something or other. And they were obviously all over the place looking for some trauma in my childhood to explain it. Some terrible thing, you know, and there's nothing. And you know, you almost start to think, well, maybe I've forgotten some terrible trauma. It's suppressed, you know.
Yeah.
And now, of course, I realize rubbish, because I realize now that my previous incarnation in World War One, I had been blinded in the war, you know, all these sort of gas and explosions and stuff. And it was a horrific end to that life, a horrendous end to that life. So what happens? You come through into the next life, you wake up with a fear of anything to do with blindness whatsoever across the board. So yeah. So I sort of explored it on that, but it was interesting to explore it with a psychotherapist, because they were sort of analysing it off the planet, you know, with all sorts of theories. And there was me, sort of innocent little me, saying, well, I don't know. I mean, maybe you're right, you know. But nothing made any sense. And quite honestly, it didn't make any difference either. So, because it wasn't dealing with the right, you know, the right thing at all.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's particular when we're talking about a phobia, because often if you have unconscious memory of a trauma, then it will, that's at least how I see it, then it will show up in this life as well in some version. But then with a phobia, it can be very unexplainable.
Yeah.
Inexplainable.
Yeah. And very debilitating. Very debilitating indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
okay,
past lives.
So that was the blindness, but then what postponed you going to meditation, going to clairaudience? Why did it take you so long?
Now that's, you see, yes, again, propelled is the word. Because basically, I was pottering along, doing my own thing until I got married and I had my children. And the kids had all sorts of problems with allergies. My daughter was like a nightmare. She was allergic to everything. She could hardly eat anything at all. And then my son went down with what we call glandular fever, which is called mono in America, I think. And these kind of problems, and they were huge at the time, pushed me into looking for alternative therapies because I was quite simply desperate. And that's why I call it propel, because with me, it's always desperation that pushes me into the next stage, because otherwise you're complacent and you just carry on, with your life. You don't have to do anything. So the kids really pushed me right into these things. And with Alexander, when he had he was so unwell with glandular fever, with mono, and we just couldn't get him better. And finally, out of sheer desperation, I knew there was like a little healing group somewhere in town, because I'd seen these people sort of standing there, and I said to the receptionist, "Oh, what are they doing?" She said, "Oh, they're doing healing." I thought, "Oh, that's a bit weird." Okay, so that was my very first introduction to Reiki. And then when Alexander was ill, I thought, "Oh God, what am I going to do?" So I rang up the reception and said, "Oh, can you contact these people for me?" And one of them very kindly came out. And it was all a bit spooky at the time, because I was perfectly normal middle-class mom at that point, and came out and did some healing on Alex. And then I said, "Oh, well, what do we do now?" And he said, well, he suggested 3 sessions in 1 week, and then take note to see how he's doing, sort of thing. So he did this one healing. He was completely better. He never needed anymore.
Oh my God.
It was just like, what? I thought, my God, this is Jesus. It was incredible. And he'd been ill for months. One healing, and he was up, and he's never had it since. Because of course it can go into ME and all this stuff. No, he was absolutely fine. And then this guy said, "Oh, you can do this on a weekend course, do a Reiki attunement, you can do this." I said, "My goodness, where is it? I'm signing up now." And that is literally how I got into Reiki. I'd never heard of it before, and it just came and completely cured my son. So my kids have got an awful lot to do with pushing me forward. Yeah.
Oh, this is
and then
is
one
really
thing
great.
leads to another.
Yeah. Oh, it's inspiring in several ways for me, because I also have a daughter who is very allergic, and there's always some illness. So that's really inspiring. That's the way to go.
Yeah.
But then it's also inspiring because. Is it okay that I mention a little bit of your astrology now?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Because usually I'm saving it, but now I'm like, this is exactly it. It's actually just, so you are a Gemini, which of course brings this really, witful person, and really good with writing, the communication. So that's the author in you for sure, and also the curious person in you who's open to a lot of different things. But then what I really find here is related to what we're talking about, is the moon in Scorpio.
Oh.
Yeah, the moon in Scorpio. That's definitely the psychic. Yeah, that's the potential, at least.
Oh, really?
And the thing is, now I'm going to say something that's a complete cliche when you are in the spiritual journey, that I think every listener here is. So a cliche is that when you face the limitations of where you're at, then you'll start to look deeper.
Oh, okay. Yes, definitely.
Right. And it's a cliche, because we've all, you've had hardship, and it makes you go deeper. It makes you grow ultimately. But it is Scorpio it's a Scorpio cliche. It's
Oh,
in there. That is the archetype that's doing that. That's
right.
propelling us to grow
Yeah.
in a deeper way, because something, we have come to the edge. We've come to the end,
Yeah.
like a
That's
sort
it.
of a death, and then we
Yeah.
do need to do something else. So that's really that Scorpio moon, and then that it is the moon. It's also that relates to family. The moon relates
Oh, okay.
to family and to any kind of intergenerational actually aspect of your
Right.
life. Um, so yeah, it relates to family, and it also relates to your emotional processing. It means that the moon is it's really personal to you. It's your filter between you
Right.
because the emotional processing is what we retain from everything that's happening around us. Then
Mhm.
some things is what we remember.
Yeah.
And for you, that's the Scorpio themes.
Right. Oh, that's
So
fascinating. Yeah. Well,
yeah,
that's certainly me. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But it's probably true of a lot of people. It's certainly true of me that I do need that push, and then I start looking, and that's usually panic
yeah.
because as you say, you've got to the end of the road, and there is just no explanation about how you can move forward. You just have to throw yourself into a new experience like Reiki or whatever. And yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think
And then you think, oh, why didn't I do this before?
yeah.
Of course, but you didn't, because there wasn't the need. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think for you it's also because you've just needed to be with those kids, right? And then
yeah, yeah, yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
but the thing about not doing it before it gets to that point, it's also because you have a lot of Taurus, and Taurus is very safe. It's very like, I'm just gonna stay here. And you mentioned
Absolutely
yeah.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's me.
Let's just do
That's
this again.
amazing. Yeah.
So yeah, so you got your moon there to go
Oh,
a little bit, draw you a little bit in the other direction than that.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's spot on. That's absolutely spot on. Yeah. Gosh. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
Okay, so
remember. Yeah.
I got that out of my system.
No,
But
that's brilliant.
okay, good. Were you gonna say something? Otherwise, I have a few more questions for you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's just on this really weird thing when I did the very first Reiki attunement after this guy had said, sign up sort of thing, and it was a Saturday and Sunday event. So I get back after Saturday, and I think at that point they'd done like 2 attunements. They're going to do the other 2 the next day or something, and so there I am in bed, just going to sleep, and it's like just as you're about that twilight thing, just as you're on the edge of sleeping, so your thoughts are sort of wandering.
Yeah.
I saw, and I can still see him now, this Native American Indian, looking to the left, I think. And I was just saying, oh, that's an Indian. Um, that's weird, sort of thing. So you kind of just vaguely think, and then he blinked. I was laughing. So I've never forgotten that. And it was a real light, because sometimes you just think it's an image, and that's strange enough. But this was like he blinked, and I think, oh my God, he's a real live person. And that was right in the middle of this Reiki weekend. So again, that was just such a significant moment for me.
It was it your first time seeing people like that?
Yeah, it was. That was the very first
Wow.
time.
Wow.
And
And did it
you
then
know,
just continue for you? Did it just that these people would show up?
not
Figures?
not very often. Not very often, no. When I started meditating, I started seeing it more almost in cartoon-like fashion, to start with, and which is the symbolic way of coming through. But I've never forgotten this chap. Yeah, he was just, and that was, oh goodness, how long ago was that?
But can
30
you
years ago.
30 years ago?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
But can you then contact them now that you've seen them? You've seen him blink. Can you then like contact him somehow if you wanted
Well,
to?
I don't know who he was.
Okay.
He's long gone, but
Okay,
but
okay.
but yeah, my main communication is through thought, and I hear voices coming back now. So that's it. But anyway, sorry, you were saying, yeah, about the
No, that's interesting. It's
yeah.
just trying to understand how it works. But yeah, the thinking that it's So it's through thought, you said, and through hearing.
Yes, I wonder, I think a question, and I will get a response back. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. But also when I'm writing, it's very much sort of I'm hearing the next sentence as I'm writing the last one. So it's a flow which is going on very, very rapidly. And that's where all sorts of puns and riddles and things are kind of thrown into it. And then you have to go back through it again and make sure it makes sense, you know. So and then a deeper level of understanding comes through.
Yeah. And if you don't know what Diana is talking about, you'll know when you read the book.
Yes, indeed. Yes, I tried the best I could to make it intelligible and sort of break it down. So my book is very much with paragraph headings. And so I've got a heading and then I'll explain that. And I've got another heading and I'll explain that. And that is almost as much for me as it is for the reader. Otherwise, I can be lost in you know in spiritual thoughts, but yes, so it's in bite-sized pieces.
That's the whole challenge, is to get it down here and to turn it into matter. So in the introduction to your book, the text about your book, it says that you challenge the ideas we have about reincarnation, and I wondered how that is. Is it because the way that you explained it, that you would look at past lives the way that you do, through one person having been several other persons, or how does it challenge our view of reincarnation?
I think because it links incarnations. I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, I'm not a world expert on reading everybody's book on reincarnation, but this one certainly looks at the links through time, multiple times, and links them all together. And that's something I think which is quite new. I mean, I think a lot of books on reincarnation are done by researchers. You know, they'll talk about this little boy in Nepal and he saw, you know, he's talking about this or that or something, but they're compiling other people's stories. Whereas this isn't. This is completely psychic. It's not research, it's psychic. And it's using my spirit guides, obviously wonderful knowledge, famous people, and how they've interlinked through time. I mean, for example, what came through in the book is Michael Douglas. He's another celebrity. They use celebrities a lot, partly because they're well-known characters, so that you can think about them. You know, Michael Douglas as a very intellectual writer or actor today, and how he was or might have been, say allegedly here, might have been Julius Caesar. And his father, Kirk Douglas, was Vercingetorix, the leader of the Gauls. And they had a battle, of course, between them, you know, in ancient times. So, but also in that particular instance, my spirit guide is talking about colors and how they have different properties, shall we say, to them. So the yellow is the intellect, and I think a lot of psychics will understand that when yellow comes through, it's the intellect. It's a symbol. Green is nurturing. It's of the land. It's Gaia. It's part of Gaia. So in Kirk Douglas and his son Michael Douglas, it's explaining how different colors can relate to different characters, and they're just using celebrities today as examples of symbolism, psychic symbolism. But it's fun. It's fun. Wow. As long as I don't get any letters from Michael Douglas legislating. Hence, it's all fantasy. It's all fantasy. But they're good examples, you know.
So, but it's people. This whole web of people there's a lot to take in when you start doing that, right? You go back through one lineage and connect to historical figure. That's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, what came through with Michael Douglas which isn't in the book because I took it out in the end. I mean, the thing is, you can go deeper and deeper and deeper into one personality, and more information comes out. But how much is relevant? But what came through is he was Wolfram von Eschenbach, who wrote the Parsifal in the which is famous German literature in the Middle Ages. He was Wolfram, and I thought, well, how much do we want to know about Michael? So it got binned, but it's a wonderful the psychic is so wonderful when it comes through so clearly. It's a wonderful gift to have, and I find myself just fascinated by what's coming through and writing it down, and then you have to pick and choose as to what goes in the book. But
yeah. Wow. Okay. So, but you also have COVID and Atlantis. It's
oh yes,
it's quite the title of a book. Where it's like, whoa, that's a lot. How do you connect these themes?
The COVID thing is because what I'm looking at is in Gaia is the how the Earth form has been corrupted through chemicals. So it's looking at modern day medicine, which is, fundamentally chemicals, and how chemicals pollute the body. And the COVID, particularly this vaccine policy, which went right the way around the world. So in other words, everyone's body has had to, almost everybody's body has taken on that particular chemical. So chemicals can destroy the psychic element to life a lot. So that's where that came in, really. It was really talking about, big agriculture, big pharma, big technology, big everything under the sun, taking over the earth when that cannot be good. So yeah, that's but yeah.
I'm having I'm having thoughts that are a little maybe outside of what you're saying, but it's just when you were talking about with all taking in this toxic potentially vaccine or well, okay,
it's another chemical on top of all the other chemicals that doctors have given. That's right. Chemical, it's just the sheer amount of chemical pollution in the world at the moment is dreadful. So yeah,
I'm just thinking, what if you got the choice to be, you could just be normal? If someone were to offering you a vaccine that would just make you normal, like a herd person, just someone who belongs to the group immediately, it's just gonna be easy for you. I wonder if you would take that. Sometimes, when you have a clear spiritual calling, then that's a tempting thought. Could I just not? Could it just be easier for me to take this vaccine? It's just an image I had when you were talking. What do you think about it?
Well, that's right. I mean, I think that the advantage of modern day medicine is you go along there and you say, I've got this problem, doctor, and he gives you something, and you don't have to think about it, whereas alternative medicines, it's much more that you have to hunt around and find what's going to suit you better. It takes a lot more work.
But I even meant in a metaphorical sense, if you could go, I don't know how much you're struggling with because it seems like you're really doing this now, being a psychic medium. But I mean, it's not the easy path, right?
It isn't, no, because most people will, quite. I mean, you can will deny its existence because, in their terms, it doesn't exist. Of course, I mean, it's rather like you with your astrology. I should think you have the same problem.
Oh yes.
That people will dismiss it simply because they cannot access it in any way themselves. It doesn't make any sense to them. You have to go through a long period of I think going via the natural route to life in order to understand how much these things matter and how much they're relevant, So yes, most people will, think it's rather strange. I mean, I had one reviewer who it's interesting actually, the reviews, because I mean, and these are the intellectuals who obviously have no understanding of psychic at all whatsoever. So they say, yes, it's very well written, it's very interesting. Do I believe it? No, of course not.
Right.
But he's very clever.
Yeah.
So the wording, of course, is very clever because it's psychic wording, and the psychic always interlinks on so many different levels, you know. But yes, they struggle, of course. I think it's really for people who are open-minded, broad-minded, and wish to ponder. Really, it's a book, philosophical book in many ways. Ponder on how reincarnation might impact on them in some way. You know, what I'm hoping is that people will look at these stories, George Harrison or whatever, or Michael Douglas, and think, yes, I wonder who I was in a past life, you know, and open up the thoughts, you know, and think, okay, fears, phobias. Also, it's not just fears and phobias that link into your past lives, but it's also glorious moments of energy. I mean, I remember when I went, when I was about 13, we went on holiday. We went to Versailles, you know, and it was just like, wow, I didn't know what had hit me. It was just the most fabulous moment of my life going to Versailles. And I was so energized by it. And it was so exciting. And I just wanted to see everything. I never wanted to leave it again. So I just thought, oh, that's me having a good day. Now, years later, I now realize that I did have a life at Versailles.
Wow.
I was a courtly lady.
Okay.
And it was a great life.
Wow.
And I was revisiting happiness.
Yes.
So, you know, whereas with a fear or a phobia, you're revisiting terror in a past life. Glorious day. You're visiting happiness. This is a place that just feels so nice because I had a wonderful life there before.
That's
you know,
interesting. Okay.
So if you put those experiences together and write them down, you've got maybe a few very good ideas about what kind of lives you may have had in the past, you know.
Yeah, that's
it's building on the land to a certain extent. I mean, I was reading a biography of a famous chap in Britain a few years ago. I love biographies because I'm always looking out for psychic links in them, you know. And anyway, this guy, he said at one point, I get withdrawal symptoms if I don't go to Rome at least once a year.
Wow.
Well, for me, that is an obvious clue to the fact that he'd had a wonderful life in Rome at some point, you know. Now, and then, so with that thought in my head, I was thinking about the rest of his bio. And I do know that he did A-level Latin. So that's interesting in itself. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Latin, fair enough. And then later on in the book, he said, he lives in London. He said, you know, one of his lovely things he loves to do is put the heating right up in the house and wander around in a towel. Well, that's his toga, isn't it? You know, so once you've got the basic clue, which was that he just can't stay away from Rome, he just loves it so much, and then you can tag on other ideas, which may or may not be relevant, but you know, it's fascinating. But that's what all of us can do, you know.
That is, I like that. That's
yeah.
It's similar to what you do in astrology. It's like, connecting. Yeah. Oh,
yes.
That's
really
really
you
fun.
start to make links. That's right. You know.
And so I'm really happy that you said that you just added this, that it can both be, you know, the phobia, and it can also be excellent moments, and that people can really use this to imagine for themselves. I think it's so peculiar with the whole imagination that even imagination can seem that we have to judge it then afterwards. Is it true or is it not? But maybe we could ask, was it useful?
That's right. You can bring your intellect into that once you've looked at your emotional responses to either land, you know, as in a holiday moment, or fears and phobias, anxieties, all this kind of stuff. You put all those down. You can then bring your intellect in, and rather like me with this guy, I have no idea because I haven't looked into his past lives, but it seems to me that Rome is probably a significant one, and so anyone can do that. It's
so
fun.
what is it that you do then? I know we just have a few minutes left here, but I wanted to ask, what is it exactly you do when you say I haven't looked into that? Because for me as an astrologer, it's data. I need data and I look at a chart, so that's very concrete. But for you, what do you do? Is it through meditation that you look into it, or how does it work?
No. With clairaudience, I would probably go on my computer, on Word or whatever, put in a name like X in this guy's name, and words would start to flow. They'd simply start coming through. It's clairaudience. It's called telepathic clairaudience. So I just hear the words, and I hear it in a male voice. He's got a great sense of humor, but he will. I mean, it's a lovely thing is that I can ask anything practically, and the information will come through. So
I'm just asking because I don't know. Is it? Do you sell this? Can you contact you and then give your name and then you do this? Can you?
I can do on my website. That's right, which is rutlandhealing.co.uk. I have a contact me button, and I can do research, yes, into people's past lives. Okay. That's right. It's probably best to say, look, I've got this particular issue or whatever. Yeah. What can I, how does that sort of fit in with past lives? What can I do about it? How can it be healed? Right. Because I'm a healer. Yes. So these are, and in fact, in my book, Atlantis and Gaia, towards the end, I look at homeopathic healing, because I'm a homeopath, and how that works. So I'm sort of doing a bit of PR really for alternative medicine, and how that can help certain complaints. I was looking at chest complaints because it was COVID at the time, and looking at homeopathic remedies for chest disorders. But I mean, anything's possible. It's called channeling. I think people call it channeling, don't they, as well? Channel information.
Okay, yeah. And I also recognize it from when I do readings. I kind of want to have a question because it is so vast otherwise.
Yeah, otherwise you'll get all sorts of information, but it's like, then what do you do with it? So let's have something a bit more specific.
It's funny with some similarities anyway in the way of working. Okay, so just here. So I want to be naughty and take a screenshot in a moment, if that's okay, for the social media. Is that okay with you?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so I'll do that. But in the meantime, because it's going to take me a while to press the right buttons, it's always like that. But in the meantime, maybe you can think, is there something that you want to say to the listeners, something that you want to emphasize? Okay, so you think about that, and I'll take a photo of us.
Oh, right, okay.
Can you sit a little bit more up or something? I think, that's good. That's good. Right. Much better. Okay, thank you. Okay. Yes, I got it.
Right. This is success. You're better at technology than I am. I'm a very untechnical person.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that what I have learned really through delving into alternative medicine to start with, and then moving into the psychic side, is that it's so positive, because there's always a reason, there's always an answer, there's always a way through if you look hard enough. And that's the wonderful thing, I think, about the psychic element. And also to Gaia's healing plants, is they are incredibly potent. They're very, very strong. And homeopathic, the number of miracles, I mean, and it is miracles I've witnessed through using homeopathic medicines over the years, is just phenomenal. They work far better than conventional medicine, but they take time to to work out the correct prescription. And also sometimes they take time to work, but they work on a level of healing the condition and not pacifying, the symptoms, which is really the way conventional doctors work. Which is why, of course, they say, well, here are these pills, you'll have to take them for life. Because they're not curing anything. They're just dumbing down the symptoms. Whereas homeopathic medicine, it actually cures it. And that was something that took me quite a long time to realize myself. And now, of course, I take it for granted because you're brought up again in the West, believing that, well, you can't cure anything, but, the doctor will give you something to help out, sort of thing, unless it be antibiotics. But I mean, basically, these long-term chronic conditions, they're not curable. Yes, that they are curable. You can do it with homeopathy. So again, it's broadened my mind really to using healing techniques which are what we might call on the fringe. And I imagine you perceive yourself on the fringe as well.
Well, I'm not really. I'm not familiar with that term. But does that
on the fringe? Yeah, on the edge of society, on the edge of life, looking in.
For sure. I'm like, looking at the Christmas window, wanting to be normal myself.
That's right. Yeah. You want to be in there, but you can't be because most people simply don't understand your perspective, your way of, your way of being, which is sad. So I'm hoping this book will sort of open people's minds to actually thinking beyond the doctor's surgery, beyond the church service, and looking, outside that. It's for a long time, I wondered, what is the matter with me? I always seem to have a problem with the church. I seem to have a problem with the doctor. I seem to have a problem with this and that. What is my problem? And now I realize that it's just the psychic healing element is not within that sort of central area of material thought. It's beyond that, But it's fascinating stuff. Yeah.
It's very encouraging, Diana. It's very, very encouraging for someone like me, and I'm sure the listeners as well, to hear that. And I'm definitely going to look into the homeopathic field now, because I'm like, oh, okay, does it work that well? I'm going to check that out then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, gosh, it's incredible. It's incredible what homeopathy can do, particularly when you've got small children. I mean, because they respond so fast to homeopathy. It's fantastic. Yeah.
They haven't taken on all of those layers of adaptation.
Their vitality is stronger. That's
vitality is stronger.
So they bounce back quicker. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So that's for another podcast.
Yes, absolutely. But I'm glad that you mentioned it. Thank you so much, Diana. And I will link to your book and to your website in the show notes so everyone can find you there.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Well, thank you for inviting me on, and it's been lovely meeting you and chatting away.